Good evening, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. I'm very happy to be invited back to Ti-Ratana Buddhist Society here in Klang. As I understand that you'll be moving to the new Vihara by the end of the year, so this could very well be my last sharing here at this venue. But I'll be back in December, so I hope that I will be able to do a sharing over in your new Vihara in December. The topic for this evening is abandoning the five hindrances. When I first heard about these five hindrances, I thought it was very straightforward, very simple. And in a way, if you think about it, it is a very simple thing, but then there is a much deeper meaning behind it, which is what I'm going to share today. What is the deeper meaning behind these five hindrances? Now, it's very important that every time we look into the Buddha's teaching or we try to share the Dhamma, that we should always go back to the root of the Buddha's teaching, the beginning of the Buddha's teaching, how it all started. So when the Buddha first became enlightened, the first sermon he gave was called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, and this is what was called setting into motion the wheel of Dhamma, where he expounded on the Four Noble Truths to the five ascetic friends whom he practiced asceticism together. Now, most people would have thought that in that sutra, the main teaching of the Buddha was the Four Noble Truths. Now, there's no doubt that the Four Noble Truths was the main teaching, but there is something which I notice has not been spoken about very much. And that is, before the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha actually spoke about a very important topic called the middle way, right? So, what did the Buddha speak about in this Four Noble Truths first? In the Four Noble Truths, which is the main teaching of the Buddha, the root of the Buddha's teaching, he said that there is suffering, there is dukkha. That every one of us will experience dukkha in many different ways, every day, day in, day out, almost constantly, non-stop. Whether we are awake or even when we are asleep, we could still be experiencing some form of dukkha. In our dreams, we may get excited. All that is also dukkha. And then the Buddha spoke about the origin of dukkha and went on to say that dukkha can be ended, and therefore there is a way that leads to the ending of dukkha, which is then the sublime eightfold way, or the noble eightfold path, as some people call it. Now, I won't go into the Four Noble Truths in any shape or form. What is more important, as today's topic is about the five hindrances. So basically, the five hindrances is centered around the first two of these Four Noble Truths. That there is dukkha, and that here in today's sharing, dukkha is manifested in a way that is described as the five hindrances. And then, of course, there is an origin to it, so we're going to look at how it arises, what it is, and of course there's a way leading to the ending. But before the Buddha actually taught the Four Noble Truths, he started talking about the middle way. That's how he actually started to explain to the five ascetics about the middle way. Now, because in the Nikayas, or in that particular sutra, or even in other sutras, the middle way was not very well expounded, not very well explained in details by the Buddha. So it was not something that had very detailed explanation. But I'm very fortunate to have met my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, who explained to me in much more detail what this middle way is. And that helped me understand it, because when I first heard about the middle way, I thought it was just a simple thing, a little bit of here, a little bit there, that is the middle way, but that is not. I'm going to explain that in a moment. So what is the middle way? And the Buddha said that there are two extremities to be avoided. The first extremity is that because we have these five senses, we are able to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch a lot of things going on in our environment, right? A lot of activities going on. We will from time to time experience sensual pleasures or displeasures. We will experience emotional excitement and arousals. So the first thing to be avoided is to indulge in these arousals, to react to these arousals. Basically, it is to expression of emotional excitement by releasing tension in action. That means when we get excited, either it is something that we like and then we say, oh, we want more of it. That is releasing that tension in action. Or it is something we don't like and we get angry and try to fight it off. That is also another kind of tension in action. Right? So this is to be avoided. The Buddha knew that well, because as a prince, he was living in a palace and he was very well taken care of. In fact, he had 3 palaces, one for the winter months, one for the summer months, and one for the rainy seasons. So basically, he knew what he was talking about. By the time he became enlightened, he had already gone through all the things that we are going through now, right? The experience of sensual pleasures. Then he pointed out that there is another thing to be avoided. The other extreme is the extreme of asceticism, which is self-torment and self-mortification. This means that when we get emotionally aroused, what do? We suppress our emotion. We withhold any emotional reaction and force ourselves not to react. And that forcing itself will also bring suffering. So both these extremes will bring suffering. And in fact, this forcing ourselves not to react, the extreme practice there is the practice of asceticism, which is what he had practiced together with those 5 ascetics. So this is really suppressing of emotional urges by withholding the tensions so that we don't react, we force ourselves, and that forcing can also lead to suffering. So the first one is emotional reaction. This indulgence is emotional reaction to sensual pleasures or sensual feelings. Feelings that is pleasurable, we want more of it. Feeling that is unpleasant, we want to fight against it. The other extreme is withholding, forceful effort to restrain emotion, forcing ourselves not to react. So these are the 2 extremes to be avoided, and the Buddha said that there is a middle way. And what is the middle way? At first, when I heard about the middle way, I thought, oh, the middle way means when we are emotionally excited, we just limit our indulgence to a little bit. And then at the same time, we withhold it and try not to indulge. And a little bit here, a little bit of indulgence, a little bit of withholding, that is the middle way. That's what I thought it was. That is not the middle way. That is compromise. The middle way is a third way, which means when we get emotionally excited, when we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something that arouses our emotion, makes us like it because it's pleasant, or makes us hate it because it is unpleasant, what should we do? The middle way is conscious relaxation, which means when we get emotionally excited, learn to relax. And what else? Then there are 3 things. The second one is to bring the attention inwards, introspective attention, by examining what's going on inside the body and inside the mind, right? And then the third one will lead us to a state of mental equilibrium, where the mind is at peace and the mind is calm and composed. And this is, in fact, the whole practice is explained thoroughly in the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path, or my teacher calls it the Sublime Eightfold Way. So that is really the middle way. Practicing the Eightfold Way is practicing the middle way. Now, this thing about conscious relaxation, introspective attention, and mental equilibrium, this works in both ways. First, when we practice meditation, we are doing that. The other one is in our daily life, throughout the day in and day out, we can also practice the middle way in this manner to help us overcome all the distractions of the world. Right? I'll come to this in a bit more detail in a moment, but let's move on a bit. The whole teaching of the middle way is explained very thoroughly in the Eightfold Way, the Sublime Eightfold Way, or my teacher called the Supernormal Eightfold Way. And this is also called the Noble Eightfold Path. The first two is the cultivation of a basic level of wisdom, understanding what is right from wrong, understanding what is wholesome from unwholesome, what can help us versus what can harm us or hurt us. And having that understanding, that is right view, right? In the basic understanding. And with that understanding, we now want to change our lives. We want to practice what we have understood. Wanting to practice, this wishing or the desire to practice, that will lead us to the second of the Eightfold Path, and that is the right intention. Right view sometimes is called right understanding, and right intention is sometimes called right thought, right thinking. Okay, now my teacher calls it harmonious perspective and harmonious orientation. Harmonious perspective is because of the word samaditi. The word sama does not mean right or wrong. The word sama comes from the Pali root word sam. Sam basically means together. Now here the together means something that is working in harmony, not fighting, not in conflict. The opposite of being in conflict. So the opposite of conflict is togetherness, harmony. That's why my teacher calls it harmonious perspective, harmonious orientation. So harmony and harmonious is a more accurate word to explain the Pali word sama, samaditi, sama sankappa. Once we have this right understanding, right knowledge, right view, right understanding, and then having the intentions to want to change our lives, we begin to practice it. And then comes the next part. The actual practice begins with right speech. So that we learn to cultivate right speech. And when we speak about right speech, there are four areas to cultivate. First is that we do not speak untruth. We do not tell lies. The second is we do not say things that cause people to fight amongst themselves. And that is called malicious speech or divisive speech. The third is that we do not say things that hurt people or harm people. And that is called harmful speech. And finally, the fourth one is that we do not engage in useless speech, gossips, rumors. But we know in today's technology, many of us are getting more and more distracted into this fourth part of the right speech. You know, in WhatsApp, we have it in WhatsApp, we have it in Facebook. Some of us who are using Twitter, we have it in Twitter. We receive a message and then suddenly we get so excited, we send it out to 20 people, 30 people, or even 100 people and spread it out. And half the time, we know, half the things that you send out, they are fake news. So what are you engaging in? If you were to spread fake news is basically in a way a form of lies. So if you engage in spreading fake news, what are you doing? You are engaging in spreading lie, untruths. Okay, if you don't say you're not the one telling untruth, you're just sharing what you heard and then sharing with other people. Then this sharing of useless information, of fake news, then you are actually violating the fourth part of this right speech, and that is now you're engaging in useless speech, gossips, rumors, right? So we are getting more and more involved in that way nowadays with the use of modern technology, right? And then in terms of practicing, what is highlighted in blue, that practice is actually helping us to purify our body. So right speech is one thing, the other one is right action. That means we do not indulge in things like stealing, we do not indulge in things like killing, we do not indulge in things like sexual misconduct. So various forms of unwholesome practices with the body. And then finally, right livelihood. Now this one, the translation is a little bit strange because the word ajiva is somehow translated as livelihood, and to many of us, when we hear the word livelihood, we think of it as our occupation. Now, here the Buddha is not only referring to choosing the right occupation. He's not only referring to not being involved in harmful occupation that causes hurt and suffering to others, such as selling drugs, right? Getting people to get drunk, getting people to smoke more and all that. Now, it's not only about that. What the Buddha meant in Samma Ajiva is harmonious lifestyle, as my teacher explained it very clearly. Here the Buddha meant the way we live our life, not only the occupation. Occupation is a very important part. Do not indulge or engage in occupation that brings harm or hurt to other people, but we also have to be very clear the way we live our life, right, to be wholesome. So this second part that is in blue is purifying the body. Now comes the third part, that is in green. Now this purifying the body is really sila, loosely translated as morality or virtuous conduct, that help us purify our body. Then comes the third part, samadhi, tranquility, the cultivation of the mind, purification of the mind. So that is what the Eightfold Way is really about. Right? This third part is about purification of the mind that begins with harmonious exercise, sama vayama, right? And then leads on to the practice of mindfulness. They call it right mindfulness, samasati. And the detailed practice there in samasati is really from the Satipatthana. Like the four, what is commonly called the four foundations of mindfulness. And finally, it leads us to a higher level of cultivation of the mind, and that leads us to a state of mental equilibrium, and that is samadhi. Samadhi is often translated as concentration, but my teacher has explained very clearly the word samadhi does not mean concentration. Later on, if I get a chance, I'll show you in practice why concentration is not the right thing to do. Because when you concentrate, when you try to concentrate, you put in a lot of mental effort, and that mental effort tires your mind. And when the mind is tired, it can go two ways. It can become drowsy, sleepy, lazy, or it can become restless, anxious, and agitated. So either extreme. When your mind is tired, you either want to sleep or you get upset over the slightest things. That's really what it is. So I hope I can show you later on that samadhi is really not about concentration. So the translation, right concentration, is not very accurate. My teacher calls it harmonious mental equilibrium. So today we're really going to take a look at 5 hindrances and how it affects us. What is it and how it affects us? And what can we do about it? In order to understand that, we must understand very basically what is happening in this mind, because all this is really about the way the mind perceives and conceives ideas and how the mind reacts. So in order to understand the mind, we need to go back to take a look at what the Buddha spoke about the mind. Now, in the Nikayas, those are the words of the Buddha, right? And in the Nikayas, we will find many sutras where the Buddha directly mentioned about the mind, and he used 3 words to describe the mind. So there are 3 parts of these mental experiences. The first one he calls vijnana. Vijnana refers to perception, which is what was perceived through our sense organs. When we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something, a mental object arises in the mind. We begin to become aware of what we have seen, heard, smell, taste, or touch. This awareness is the perception, and that awareness is vijnana. Some people translate that as consciousness. So you could say it's consciousness of objects, consciousness of the environment. So that is vijnana. The next part of the mind is called mano. Whenever we have an awareness of objects, we want to interpret it. So the mano is really the cognition and the conception. Cognition means we now understand what we have perceived. Conception is now we give it meaning, we create an idea behind it. So it is creating this categorized interpretation of the perception. by giving meaning to it. What we have perceived arises in the form of a mental image in the mind, and that is the rupa. We are now aware of what we have perceived, and then we start to give meaning, and we give meaning by giving it a name. By like this is a computer. We call it a computer. So that when we say this is a computer, there is a meaning behind the word computer. We understand what it is. And then we have a projector, we have a screen. So these names will give meaning. That's giving name. To give meaning is nama. So nama, rupa. But there is a third part of the mind which we have difficulty controlling, and that is called the chitta. The chitta is really the emotional part of the mind, responsible for mood and temperament, which then leads to emotional reaction. Everything we see, hear, smell, taste or touch, we feel something about it. There is a feeling behind it. So that feeling is Vedana. We begin to feel something about it, and then we react to that feeling. Right? This reaction, the mind that is reacting to that feeling, that reaction is called tanha, which is commonly translated as craving. But that's actually emotional reaction. So it's the emotional reaction from our emotional excitement or arousal to pleasant or unpleasant feelings. And this gives rise to mood or temperament, which then leads to emotional states. And that's where emotion comes in. So you could say chitta is referring to the emotional mind, mano is referring to the thinking mind. So there are really two minds going on. The thinking mind, which means we are conscious of our thoughts, and the emotional mind, which means memory, imagination arising. And the two are often in conflict. And then at the same time, whatever we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, we want to personalize that experience. We are conditioned in such a way that everything we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, we personalize. You wake up in the morning, you knock your hand against the wall and it hurts. And then what do you say? My hand hurts. What's the first word? My. Right? As you get out of your bed and you walk, and then you kick your toe against the cupboard and it hurts. Right? What do you say? What do you say about the pain that you're feeling? I feel the pain. I feel painful. What's the first word? I. Every experience we have, we are always trying to personalize it with I, me or mine. In fact, that has gone so far today in the modern world that we are no longer just personalizing what's happening to the body. We are now personalizing objects outside the body. My phone, my car, my house. See, all these are mental activity at personalizing whatever it is that we are experiencing. So that personalization is called upadana. Upadana is often translated as clinging, grasping, or attachment. But that is really what it means, personalizing. So the part of the mind that is responsible for our suffering is chitta. Now at this point, before I go on, I want to point out very importantly, this is where a lot of misunderstanding comes up. All the translators who translate the sutras into English from Pali, whenever they see the word mano, they translate it as mind. Whenever they see the word chitta, they translate it as mind. They don't differentiate. Now, until recently, I wasn't sure why translators did not differentiate, but a couple of months back, I started spending a lot of time studying the Abhidhamma, and I realized that is the reason, because of Abhidhamma. But Abhidhamma is known that it was not the direct words of the Buddha. And in the Abhidhamma, whoever composed the Abhidhamma, they continuously use chitta to mean every aspect of the mind, mixing the meaning of mano and chitta. Everything is called chitta in Abhidhamma. That's why people use the word chitta to mean the mind without realizing that there is a distinction. But Abhidhamma is not the direct words of the Buddha. The Nikayas, the sutras, those are the direct words of the Buddha. And in the sutras, throughout the sutras, the Buddha was very careful at choosing the word chitta or mano. Because whenever he used the word chitta, he was referring to emotions. Whenever he used the word mano, he was referring to the thinking mind. So the Buddha was differentiating with the word chitta and mano. But the translators didn't differentiate. They just translate everything as mind. So I'll give you one simple example, and this is also an important example to understand. This is from the Chitta Sutra. In Chitta Sutra, this translation says, the world is led around by mind. By mind, it's dragged here and there. Mind is the one thing that has all under its control. Notice that everything is translated as the word mind. But I offer you now an alternate translation from my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji, where he says the actual translation to what the Buddha spoke there was, emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Emotion is the one thing to which all are spellbound. Why? Because the Buddha used the word chitta. So the Buddha was referring to emotions. And this is a very important message here. Emotions dominate the world. That means it's emotion that seems to be controlling us. Emotions that make us react according to our emotions. And emotions create distress. Distress is mental suffering. So emotions can create a lot of mental suffering. The way we interpret things emotionally, it brings us a lot of suffering. And then emotion is the one thing to which all are spellbound. Which means if we allow emotion to dominate, we are under the control of emotion and we can no longer take control of ourselves. Our thinking mind is taken over by the emotional mind. Chitta is now in control. Mano part of our mind is not in control anymore when we allow emotions to take control. So this is really what this message means here. Now, I want to show you another message, in fact, the most quoted Buddha saying ever, I think. Mano Pubangama Dhamma. This is the very first verse of the Dhammapada. And this is commonly translated as, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their master. They are all mind-made. Even though the Buddha was using the word Mano. Mano Pubangama Dhamma. The Buddha didn't say Chitta Pubangama Dhamma. The Buddha said Mano Pubangama Dhamma. What does it mean? Now I'll give you now my teacher's translation, right? Where the Buddha used the word mano, and Venerable Dr. Punaji has then translated this to say, cognition precedes all experiences. It predominates and creates all realities. Cognition is our thinking mind. What we decide, what we think and what we decide. Right? How we think and what decisions we make. That actually precedes our experiences. Whenever we see, hear, smell, taste or touch something, what do we really want? What decisions do we make about it? And that can change our reality. So it predominates and creates all realities. So here it is our thinking mind, cognition. Right. So basically, I hope now you understand that there is a difference between chitta and mano. Very importantly, because the Buddha was very clear when he explained what is emotional and what is thinking. Later on, I'm going to show you the scientific evidence that differentiates between these two. So moving on, now today's topic is really about 5 hindrances. First, I will talk about 5 hindrances with respect to meditation. So as we all know, there are 2 major categories of meditation. Samatha meditation and Vipassana meditation. Now the next couple of slides in these pastel colors, they came from Ayasma Agacita. I borrowed these slides from him with his permission to be able to show it, to explain some of the important things. So this came from the Nikaya, from the Tatiya Samadhi Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force. The differentiation between Samatha and Vipassana. Now, what is Samatha meditation? Basically, the practice of Samatha meditation is to accomplish 4 stages. These 4 stages is firstly to bring the mind to stand properly. That means to steady the mind. And then to bring the mind to settle down, right? Sit properly. This is actually using the analogy of a person running. When you're running, you are doing a lot of movement. So now, if you want to stop that movement, what do? You stand. So you no longer run. There's not a lot of movement anymore. But standing is just steadying. The next thing is to sit down. Then you become more calm. So that is to sit, for the mind to sit properly. And finally, for the mind to be unified. Here, unified means referring to the two minds, the chitta and the mano, unifying to become one. Right? That means the chitta and the mano are no longer in conflict. They are no longer going in opposite direction. Because when the chitta and the mano are going in opposite direction, that leads to a condition called vicikicca, commonly translated as skeptical doubt. But I'll explain later on, vicikicca is not skeptical doubt. Vicikicca means the thinking mind and the emotional mind are in conflict with each other. So this third part, unified, means these two minds are no longer in conflict, they become one. And when they become one, then the mind is still, able to still. And finally, how it brings that mind to a state of stillness, composure. Now you notice that I'm very thankful to Ayasma Agachita. When he made this translation, he did not translate the word chitta. He left the word chitta untouched. How is the chitta to be made to stand properly? Steadied. Right? How is the chitta to be made to sit properly? Settle down. How is the chitta to be made unified? With the mano. Right? And how is the chitta to be brought together and placed? That means, placed means it's all still. That word placed there means stillness. It's all placed, right? Not moving anymore. So this is really what samatha meditation is about. Stilling the chitta. Bringing the chitta, the emotional mind, to a state of calm, to a state of stillness. And that state of stillness will lead us to experience this mental equilibrium called samadhi. Right? And that is really the purpose of samatha meditation, to lead the mind to a state of samadhi. Now, what then is vipassana? Now, I'm not going to talk much about vipassana, but I'm just showing this here for reasons of contrast. Here, vipassana is mainly engaged with understanding sankhara, the construction, right? Mental construction. How are sankhara to be seen or observed, right? And then how are sankharas to be investigated or studied or understood? And finally, how are sankharas to be discerned, differentiated, right? And this will help us to clearly see. And this clearly see, discerning, ability to see in a discerning manner is called vipassana. Passana means seeing, not seeing with the eyes, but seeing with the mind. Understanding, having clear knowledge. V here means discern, distinct, clear. Discerning means able to see one thing from the other, not having all jumbled up. Right? So vipassana is to be able to see very clearly. And what are we trying to see clearly? That is trying to see clearly the three realities of life: anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Right? So basically, that is what vipassana is. So the difference between vipassana and samatha, where samatha is about how to still the chitta. Right? The chitta, remember, it's not the mano, it's the chitta that needs to be calmed down, and not about the objects of focus. The objects of focus is just a mechanism, the breathing, for instance. It is not about breathing. When we use breathing, right, as the object in our meditation, samatha meditation, that breathing is really just a mechanism to help us bring the chitta to a state of stillness. So the breathing was not the purpose. The breathing is just the mechanism that helps us to bring the chitta to a state of stillness, because it's all about stilling the chitta. And vipassana is about understanding sankhara. Okay? And in a nutshell, basically, samatha meditation is about attaining samadhi, right? And culminating in stillness of mind. And then vipassana is about gaining wisdom, distinct, discerning, seeing of and comprehending of the realities of life, culminating in distinct seeing or discerning seeing, able to see clearly, so that we can now get good, clear knowledge, right, about what really is the reality of life. And that leads us to Panya. So Samatha leads to Samadhi, Vipassana leads to Panya. Basically, when we speak about the 5 hindrances, we are talking about bringing the mind to a state where there is no more disturbances, and these disturbances are called hindrances. No more hindrances, to allow us to still the mind to experience Samadhi. As long as there is any kind of disturbance or hindrance, we are not able to experience Samadhi. So what are the 5 hindrances? The 5 hindrances are commonly called Pancha Nivarana. Pancha means 5. Nivarana is talking about those hindrances, those things that hinder us, prevent us from stilling the mind. The first one is Kamachanda, which is the desire, the wish for sensual pleasures. Here, the wish is not just about something that we want more of. It's just simply wishing for it. Right? I'm going to explain a bit more, because the root word here is chanda actually. So we're going to take a look at what each of the root word means. And the second hindrance is vyapada, the opposite of that. Instead of desiring for something, we become angry and hateful for it. We want to get rid of it. Anger or hatred towards these pleasures. And the third one is commonly translated as sloth and torpor, which means laziness. But actually there is a deeper meaning behind tina and mida. There are 2 different words, 2 different things that are put together as collectively. So it refers to sluggishness, lethargy, and drowsiness. And then the next one is udacha kukucha, which again are 2 different words describing 2 conditions which are collectively grouped together, which we commonly call agitation and restlessness, and anxiety and worry. And finally, the last one, vichikicha, which is commonly translated as skeptical doubt, but actually it is not. The more accurate English term for vichikicha is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive means the way we are thinking, our cognition, our thinking, cognitive. Dissonance means being torn apart, in conflict. So what is in conflict? Our thinking mind, our rational thinking mind, and our emotional mind. They are fighting in opposite directions. I will explain that I'll give you the scientific explanation of that in a moment. So these 2 are tearing apart. In order to understand the 5 hindrances, we must go back to take a look at each of the hindrance, the Pali word. What does it mean? And I'm very thankful not only to my teacher, Venerable Dr. Banerjee. I actually have a few other secondary teachers I learned from a lot. I'm learning Abhidhamma from the Chief Reverend of Samadhi Vihara, Venerable Dhammananda, right? So where he has also helped to contribute to some of the translations I'm going to show you in here now. The first hindrance, kamachanda, desire or wish for sensual pleasures. Now, important to understand, this is not greed, right? This is not about greed. There's a slight distinction here. Kamachanda comes from 2 root words, kama and chanda. Chanda's root word is chan, which means to wish, and that is to seek or wish for something, right? Stretching out the hand to want to get something. That is, referring to chanda, the action of chanda. And the function is searching for it. So we're seeking for something, and it can manifest in the form of a wish, or even simply in an intention, having just the intention, the desire to experience something. And basically the immoral chanda is not the same as this thing called lobha. Lobha is talking about greed, lust leading to greed. Lust means, okay, we want something, but when we get it, we want more. That becomes greed. So lust turns into greed. That's what lobha is about. So lobha is a stronger version. Here, kamachanda is not so strong. The word chanda simply means to wish for it, not to become greedy or become attached to it, but just wishing for it. But you have to be careful what you wish for. If you're sitting there meditating and you feel something, and then you feel something very pleasant in your meditation, it's the peace and quiet, and then you start to have this wish, the desire, oh, how I wish I can continue to feel this. Now that wish itself is a kind of chanda. So you have to be careful that even in your meditation, you're experiencing pleasure, pleasurable feeling. Now if you begin to wish more of that pleasurable feeling, then you are beginning to enter into the first hindrance already. You have to be careful. To help us understand the 5 hindrances, I'm very fortunate to have done a recording of my teacher explaining it. So I'm going to show you this, what he says about the 5 hindrances.
The body gets agitated because we have these 5 senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body itself. So these senses are being stimulated by the environment, and that leads to a disturbance of the whole body. So that disturbance is what we call an emotion. So the disturbance can come in the form of a desire for something pleasant or a hatred of something unpleasant. And it comes in the form of desires, hatreds, anger, or worries, or fears. And this disturbance is what we have to get rid of. In other words, we have to keep our mind undisturbed by whatever happens in the world. And that is what we call samadhi. Samadhi meditation or tranquility meditation is where we stop being disturbed. So there are 5 kinds of disturbances that the Buddha has been talking about that we have to get rid of. These are what are called the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are Kāmachanda, which means the desire for sensual pleasures, the desire to see beautiful things or hear pleasant sounds or music, or the desire to smell pleasant perfumes, or the desire to taste pleasant kinds of food, or the desire to touch and feel pleasant things. So that is Kama Chanda. And in order to get rid of this, the Buddha has spoken about a meditation which is called Asubha Bhāvanā. That means meditating on the unpleasantness of what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. The real unpleasantness is simply that everything is impermanent. Every pleasant thing is impermanent. Pleasant sights are impermanent. And if we cling to those things, and if we desire those things, we'll be disappointed, unhappy. That is the dukkha. And we will also desire to own these things. Something pleasant when we see, we might want to buy it for ourselves and keep it for ourselves, to own it. That ownership is also an impermanent thing, and it can disappear from us. So, that is the unhappiness that we derive by going after pleasures and pleasant things.
What Bhante explains there is not only applicable to meditation, but also applicable to our daily life. And very fortunately, I'm going to show you the links, you can copy it later on. Bhante actually prescribed two kinds of meditation that can help us. The first one he mentioned is Asubha Bhāvanā, Asubha meditation. This is meditation on the repulsiveness of the body, or some call it meditation on the foulness of the body. And this involves examining the 32 parts of the body. Right? And then there is also another meditation that Bhante has prescribed, and that is Kalebara Bhāvanā. And this is really meditation on the decaying corpse. And you can download that document which explains both of those from this link. Now at the end of the sharing this evening, I will show you a list of all the links to download, because every hindrance Bhante has prescribed a specific meditation to help us overcome it, abandon it. So at the end of this, you can then take a note of all the links to download these meditation you can learn from. The next hindrance is vyapada, and that is anger or hatred towards unpleasant experience or displeasures. Basically, vyapada is sometimes also spelled as bhyapada with the B. And this is the wish to get rid of something and to do harm to something we don't like, right? To injure or eliminate what we don't want. And this desire to eliminate what we don't want is commonly called malevolence or ill will, having ill intentions towards something because we don't like it, we want to get rid of it, and so on. And vyapada is always present, at least in a latent way, whenever there is kamachanda. This is a very interesting point. Whenever we have desire for something pleasurable, at the same time we also have a hatred or ill will towards the opposite of that. We don't get what we want, we don't get the pleasurable things that we desire, then we begin to hate the situation. So in other words, vyapada is always present whenever there is kamachanda. So the two are the opposites, but it does not mean that they are exclusive. When there is desire for pleasant experiences, and if we don't get it, there will then be ill will for the opposite. Right? So let's listen to what Bhante says about vyapada.
Now, in order to get rid of the hatred of unpleasant things, again, if we begin to think about the impermanence of unpleasant things, that will also help us to get rid of the hatred. But we also begin to hate people. We might become angry with even our mothers or fathers or brothers or sisters or any loved ones. And to get rid of anger, we should practice what is called the Mettā meditation, which I call universal friendliness. Universal friendliness towards all beings. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. I call it universal benevolence, goodwill towards all beings. Normally our mind is a narrow mind. Narrow in the sense that we are only concerned about ourselves. So instead of being concerned only about ourselves, if we begin to think of others who are also suffering, everyone in the world, they don't like pain and they like happiness, pleasures, pleasant things. So it's not only myself that desires pleasant things or hates unpleasant things. All beings desire pleasant things and hate unpleasant things. So we wish, may all beings be free from unpleasant things. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. So we develop this Mettā meditation, wishing goodwill towards all beings. That is broadening the mind. We broaden the mind. We are not only thinking about ourselves, we think of all beings. And when we begin to think of all beings, a stage comes when we begin to think to what extent are we interested in the welfare of all beings. To what extent? How deeply are we interested in the welfare of all beings? That depth dimension is what is called Karunā. Karunā is how deeply are we interested in the welfare of all beings. So we begin to think that others are as important as ourselves. Just like a mother thinking of her only child, willing even to sacrifice her own comfort and peace for the sake of the child. In the same way, we should think of all beings and that others are as important as ourselves. That depth dimension is what is called Karunā. Karunā is how deeply are you interested in the welfare of all beings. And when we think of that, it is like a river carrying water, and this river falls into the ocean. When the water in the river falls into the ocean, the water is no more water of the river. The water becomes the water of the ocean. So in the same way, when we begin to think of all beings, to the extent that all beings are as important as ourselves, our self disappears in the interest in all beings. We don't think of ourselves anymore, we think only of all beings. May all beings be well, comfortable, peaceful and happy. So when we do that, our selfishness disappears in the interest in all beings. When the selfishness disappears, all unhappiness disappears. Because unhappiness is self-centered. We become unhappy because I want this, I want that, I don't have this, I don't have that, or I have this pain. So in the same way, when the selfishness disappears, we become happy. That happiness is what is called Muditā. The Muditā is the happiness of selflessness. When the self disappears, we are happy. So that is Muditā. But this Muditā is not an emotional excitement. It is not an emotional agitation. It's a calm, peaceful, restful, tranquil state of the mind. That happiness is a calm, tranquil state of the mind. When that happiness we begin to experience, our mind is centered within. We are not interested in whatever happens in the world. We are free from disturbances going on outside, which are called the Attaloka Dharma, the 8 vicissitudes of life, gain and loss, fame and ill fame, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. These things don't disturb our mind. Our mind remains calm and tranquil, centered within. That is called Upekkhā. So that when we practice this meditation on universal goodwill, we have 4 parts to this: Mettā, Karunā, Muditā and Upekkhā. So this meditation itself can ultimately lead to the highest state.
Very importantly, I think a lot of people who say they want to practice Mettā meditation, they only focus on Mettā meditation and that's it. But Bhante here says that you cannot just, well, not say you cannot, but you don't just only focus on Mettā alone. Bhante has gone on to describe, right, that there is a progression from Mettā to Karunā, Karunā to Muditā, and Muditā to Upekkhā. And he explained that in the form of a meditation which is described there. Compassion can be directed at 5 levels of discomfort and 5 levels of comfort, right? And helping us to cultivate that 4 stages of what is called Brahma Vihara, right? Mettā, Karunā, Muditā and Upekkhā. So that meditation can be downloaded. Next is Tina, Mida. First we look at the word Tina, because Tina, Mida are really 2 terms describing 2 things which are grouped together. First, Tina. What is Tina? Tina is sluggishness of the mind. Tina comes from the root word te and na. Te simply means to shrink. Na means dullness, which means basically shrinking to a state where it is completely inactive. Right? So basically here it is referring to the sluggishness of the mind. The mind has withdrawn. It's no longer active, no longer interested. Right? And also this is translated as sloth. Sloth simply means laziness. But to call Tina as laziness, that's not a very accurate term. It's not talking about somebody who just wants to be lazy. It's about the mind becoming so weak that it is withdrawn into itself. It no longer is interested in achieving anything. So that's not really laziness. That is sluggishness, lethargy. A more accurate explanation of that word is lethargy. And basically it is lack of driving power, and therefore it dispels whatever remaining energy you have in yourself. It is gone, it's dissipated, right? It manifests as shrinking of the mind, meaning the mind has reached a state where where it becomes so small, it's no longer interested in anything. This is the opposite of an energetic mind, viriya, right? And this is described as a kind of mental illness, sickness of the mind, right? Be aware. Thina is described as a kind of mental illness. And the opposite of adaptability, the mind is no longer adaptable, right? It's a kind of reluctance. The mind is reluctant to act on anything. Mettā is a kind of lethargy and drowsiness, right? It comes from the root word mit, which means to be inactive, to become incapable, not able to respond, right? Inactivity, lethargy, or weakness of the body. Here it is referring partly to the body now. It's not just only the mind alone, right? And therefore it is also translated as torpor. The characteristic is that the mind and the body has become so inadaptable, unwieldiness, and stifling, no longer able to respond to anything. And it manifests as lethargy, and therefore you may doze off, nodding off. This is why people say, oh, when you are sleepy, then you are experiencing tina mettā. The sleepiness is only a symptom of something that is bigger behind it, and that is the inactivity of the mind, right? So in other words, sleepiness is just a symptom. That is not really the root cause. The root cause is really the shrinking of the mind becoming no longer interested, right? And this is a morbid state, no longer interested, right? So both tina and mettā are often used together in conjunction, and where there is tina and mettā, there is no energy, no viriya. So it's the opposite of viriya. Again, Bhante has prescribed a very interesting meditation for this, so pay attention.
Kāmachanda Vyapada Tīna Middha. Tīna Middha is laziness and sleepiness. That laziness and sleepiness is also to be avoided. And it is for that we have the meditation on death, that we are all subject to aging, disease and death. And if we begin to think about this, before we die, we should purify our mind. And it is very important to purify the mind. And this is why we have to go and meditate before we die. And death is not something that we can say we are going to die today or tomorrow or day after. We cannot predict the time of death. And therefore, we should think of purifying the mind before we die. And therefore, that helps us to overcome our laziness and sleepiness. So that is a very important meditation on death.
So Bhante prescribed meditation on death, and you can download that. This meditation is called Maranānussathi, right? The meditation on death. Then comes the next one, Uddhacca Kukucca. Uddhacca is agitation and restlessness, coming from the root word U, which is over, rising above, and Du, which means to shake, to tremble. So basically it is over shaking, right? So it's a kind of restlessness. So uddhacca basically literally means over excitement or rousing, and this leads to a mind that is confused, a restless state of mind, and it has the characteristic of turmoil, disturbances. The mind becomes very disturbed. Again, be aware that the extreme of this is a kind of mental illness, and it can lead a person to go cuckoo. So it manifests as stirred up, agitated. Now the mind is being disturbed, and the proximate cause is simply because the mind is not paying attention, not paying careful attention. That's why it gets disturbed. This paying careful attention is called yoniso manasikara. Paying careful attention so that you're able to see right from wrong and all that. But because the mind is not able to do that, that's why it gets disturbed at whatever it is observing. Right? And the unsettled state of mind opposed to the calmness, collectedness. Kukucca is anxiety and worry. Right? And very importantly, to understand the root word ku and kata. Ku means evil that is done. It means you've done something which is unwholesome. Kata means the good that is not done, which means there's something you could have done, something good you could have done but you did not do, you failed to do. So kukucca simply refers to a condition of the mind where you are restless, right? It's translated as remorse, right? And in a way, remorse, it does mean remorse, but not in a very negative way, right? This is regret over the evil that has been done or unwholesome act that has taken place, as well as a good act, a good deed you failed to do. Right. Characteristic is grieving over or feeling regret over the evil that is done and the good that is not done, and feeling of guilt. Yeah, this is where the remorse comes in. This sense of guilt is remorse or regret. It is not a virtue and considered unwholesome because it leads to aversion and so on. Used together with uddhacca, it pertains to past, basically, talking about the past. That means the evil that was done in the past and the good that you failed to do in the past. And kukucca basically may indirectly lead to an increased ethical sensibility. Now this is a good part of it, in the sense that when you experience this regret, and if you pay careful attention to that feeling, you then want to do something to help yourself become a better person. So there is a positive quality of kukucca. Right? Let's see what Bhante has to say about uddhacca, kukucca.
Then we also have worries and anxieties. That is also very important. Uddhacca kukucca. Uddhacca kukucca means worries and anxieties. Worries are always about the past. We worry about what happened in the past. If we lost something in the past, we worry about that. And so, worry is mainly about the past. And when we speak of anxiety, we are talking about the future. Something might happen in the future. Maybe I might lose my job, or I might fail in my examination, or something like that might happen to me in the future. I worry about that. That is the anxieties. So in order to overcome these worries and anxieties, we learn to practice the breathing meditation, Anapanasati. So by practicing relaxing the body and breathing meditation is mainly to help relax the body and calm the mind. So we relax the body and calm the mind in the breathing meditation. It's not concentration. Some people think breathing meditation is concentration. It is not concentration. It is relaxing the breathing, relaxing the body and calming the mind. Passambayang kaya sankarang asisami sikkati. That means relaxing the body, I breathe in. Relaxing the body, I breathe out. That is the important thing, not to concentrate. And then, because concentration will ultimately lead you to what is called the hypnotic state. So we are not trying to get into a hypnotic state. The important thing is to learn to relax the body and calm the mind. That is how we overcome worries and anxieties.
As I mentioned earlier on, it's very important to recognize that a meditation like Anapanasati, which is mindfulness of the breath, the purpose is not just about analyzing the breath or observing the breath. The purpose is actually to calm the body. As we breathe in, the body calms down. As we breathe out, the body calms down, and so on. So it's really using breathing as an object. Breathing is a tool. It is not the objective anymore. It's not the purpose, right? And this is where some people may have practiced this wrongly, in the sense that they concentrate on the breath. So it's not about concentration. And you can download it. Bhante explained Anapanasati, the meditation on mindfulness of breathing, in 2 sutra lessons. Back in 2013, I recorded them, so you can download, or rather you can actually view them. This link will take you to the YouTube link to see the video of those 2 sermons that Bhante delivered. But you could also download the presentation slides as well as the handout given to the students. So all this I will give you at the end, where you have all the links on one page. You can then take a picture of that one. Now comes the last one, Vicikicca. Vicikicca is often translated as skeptical doubt. But actually the real meaning of Vicikicca is not skeptical doubt. It leads to doubt, but it's really not about the doubt. So what does Vicikicca mean? So there are 2 interpretations. First, the root word vici means seeking or inquiring, right? Looking for answers. Kich means to strain, to tire, to become perplexed or vexed, right? Vexed simply means the mind gets tired. So basically the mind gets tired looking for an answer. That's what Vicikicca here means with this first translation. But there is also an alternative translation. Both of them actually leads to the same conclusion. The alternate translation there is that the word V means the opposite, devoid, right? Cikicca here means remedy, based on knowledge, knowing the answer, and that gives you the solution. So cikicca, realizing the answer, you now have the solution. But here vicikicca means you don't have it, you fail to get it. So in both cases, it simply means you are not able to understand or being able to recognize the reality. You don't have the answer, and therefore the mind gets tired, and then you begin to doubt because you don't have the answer. You become lost, and you go into a state of delusion, right? So doubt refers to the absence of deeper spiritual confidence in the Triple Gem, right? So this deeper spiritual confidence arises from knowledge, right? So basically it's not talking about people doubting it, but people who are not having a clear knowledge, and it destabilizes us. But I'm going to explain more later on with the scientific explanation. Vicikicca. The scientific explanation is that it is cognitive dissonance. So what is cognitive dissonance? It means that a part of our mind, the thinking part of our mind and the emotional part of our mind are pulling in opposite directions. Thinking part of the mind is the conscious rational thinking of knowing right from wrong. Emotional part of the mind is the part of the mind that is feeling, wanting what is nice, what is pleasant, and not caring whether it is right or wrong. Take for example, we recite the 5 precepts. The first one is not to harm living things, not to kill. So one night maybe your aircon breaks down, your fan is not strong enough. As you try to fall asleep, you get the mosquito coming, and you try to chase it away, and it comes again, and you try to chase it away, and it keeps coming, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. By the 10th time, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to do a little clap, isn't it? Now, doing that, you have violated the very first precept, the very first of the 5 precepts. So what's going on? Does it mean that you doubt the precept? No. Your thinking mind reminds you that you have taken the 5 precepts, that you must not harm living things. And on the other hand, your emotional mind is so angry with this mosquito that keeps disturbing you. Finally, in your emotional mind, you felt you have no choice but to get rid of it. Right? That is vicikicca. So in other words, vicikicca is not like you are doubting the Dhamma. Vicikicca is you know there is the Dhamma, while at the same time your emotions lead you to behave in the opposite way. That's vicikicca. So that's really cognitive dissonance. But that can also, people can perceive it to say, you're not following the 5 precepts. Are you doubting the 5 precepts? But actually it's not about doubt. It is this emotional mind tearing in the opposite direction as the thinking mind. You see, we are very intelligent people. Human beings are very intelligent beings, but unfortunately we use our intelligence in the wrong way. So the real explanation of vicikicca is simply that when feeling and reasoning are pulling in opposite directions, right, invariably leading to this mental state called cognitive dissonance, vicikicca, what happens? We automatically or by our own conditioning, we react according to feeling. That means we slap at the mosquito, and then we try to justify our emotionally charged decision or action by using clever reasoning. I'm getting rid of all these Aedes mosquito, so we reduce dengue fever in the area. So this is intelligent justification of your emotionally charged action. That's really what vicikicca is. And this can be explained scientifically because our brain, there is an emotional part of the brain deep inside, controlled by a little structure called amygdala. Right? There is the amygdala inside, which is our emotional control center. And then our thinking brain, which is in the front here, the thinking part, where right in the lower part of the front is this prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our thinking. These two parts of the brain are constantly fighting each other, sending messages against each other. But most of the time, when you have an emotional decision and a rational decision, which are pulling in opposite direction, which do you decide on most of the time? Most of the time, emotions. Now I can show you the scientific explanation why when we are faced with emotional decision and rational decision, we choose to think in an emotional way. So let's listen to this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, turn!
And when we try to control them, we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these two systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions. This is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has super highways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala. And therefore, it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
So you can see it's all because of the way our brain has evolved. Our emotional brain, the emotional part of the brain controlled by the amygdala, has very strong connections going to our thinking brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. While at the same time, the thinking brain has very weak connections going back to the amygdala. So when the amygdala is aroused, when you're emotionally aroused, the emotional part of the brain is sending a lot of messages to the thinking brain, disturbing the thinking brain, disrupting your conscious rational thinking. While at the same time, your thinking brain has very weak connections to go back to the amygdala to try to calm down the amygdala. And that's why you're not able to tame your emotions. So when we are faced with a situation where our thinking mind is thinking of one thing and our emotional mind is thinking of something in the opposite direction, when the two are pulling in opposite directions, we normally automatically choose to think emotionally or react emotionally, because the emotional brain is stronger than the thinking brain, sending all these disturbing messages to disturb your thinking brain so you can no longer think rationally. So now you understand. Now give you an excuse. Next time you react emotionally and somebody starts to say, why are you so emotional? Don't blame me, it's my amygdala. Yeah, it's your emotional brain that is doing all the disturbances. So we can skip the last part. And Bhante has explained that you can actually meditate on the meditation on the threefold nature of existence. Right? Basically talking about anicca, dukkha, anatta. So this is the Tilakkhana Bhāvanā. And that meditation you can download, and Bhante has written it. So in summary, the five hindrances are basically we can learn how to abandon these five hindrances simply by practicing those forms of meditation prescribed by Bhante. And you can download all of them here. Now you can now take a picture of all these links. You can download all the different meditation as well as the 2 videos, Anapanasati. Right? Don't try to write it, it's too long. Take a picture. Okay, so I hope that is the end of my sharing. I hope it has been useful. Thank you very much. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.